manager from 1990 to 2019. That's a pretty achievement. You were right back in the beginning with John, weren't you? So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to these guys and they're going to tell you all about the growth of Triumph.
Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Factory Visitor Experience here in Hinckley, the home of Triumph, and thank you for joining us today to celebrate our 35th anniversary as Hinckley Triumph, which is amazing, Bruno. Where's the time gone?
It's simply flown there. It's simply flown, but you'd know that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bruno and I, between us, pretty much cover the full, well, we do cover the full 35 years, and this man is responsible for me standing here today. So without further ado, Bruno, we're going to have a little canter through the years, and we're going to go back to 1990. So what can you tell us about the first bikes that came off the track and the impact that these had, particularly here in this country?
Well, it's great that we've got a few of these actually in the car park in those colour schemes, but I think most of you will know our relaunch history. We relaunched in Cologne in 1990. People said to us, why didn't you launch at the NEC? Well, Cologne is an international show. Germany was one of our first markets, along with the UK. And once you go to Cologne, the world soon knows what new bikes are on the scene. But what was great was when we went to the NEC, we were absolutely mobbed because people already knew about our bikes, and we were mobbed by dealers who wanted to be involved in selling those bikes. Because of the modularity, of course, we had 6 bikes that we could start with. The modularity meant we shared chassis, engine components, wheels, handlebars. It meant we could come out in the market fairly instantly with 6 bikes at relatively competitive prices. And of course, in those days, the Japanese dominated. They had 90% of the market, so we simply had to be competitive. Now, the Germans elected to go for a special edition Trophy 12. I turned that down. Never having made a bike before, I thought it was odd to have a special edition, and then how do you sell the models that follow? But it worked out well because I realised the Germans couldn't sell their bikes, so I asked John if we could get them back, and the dealers soon snapped them up and soon retailed them. So 91 was the Trophy 1200 with the Trophy 900. They were launched in April. In June we launched the 2 Daytonas, the 10,000, the 1000 and the 750. And then the long-awaited Triton came out in September. To answer Devron's question, we sold nearly 1,000 bikes in 8 months. To put that into context, Ducati, we outsold those. Then they had 12 months history that year. So Ducati were a reputable company by then. The 916 was coming through, and they had a fairly serious range of bikes.
Wow, fantastic. So moving a bit further, around 93, we saw the first Tiger 900 and Speed Triple 900 coming into the range. So what was the significance of these bikes in terms of moving the game on?
Well, we were moving on because we relied on the modularity. But I've just got to go back and say 91 was a honeymoon for Triumph. We couldn't do wrong. 92 was damn hard. Anyone who was working here in 92 realised how hard it was. The press didn't help because they just told the public where it was a nearly right bike, but they're a bit heavy, high centre of gravity, bit dated, colour schemes could be better. So we actually showed the outside world how reactive we were. We made an awful lot of changes. We changed the headlights, the riding positions. We went away from those graphics. But what we saw with the new Tiger and the new Speed Triple were 2 purposeful bikes. And what I always found funny was the press said, you guys will never sell a 900 Triple Enduro, it just won't work. I think that you'll confirm the Tiger has been the backbone of Triumph sales in that period.
Absolutely right, and to this day, which we'll touch on a little later on.
And of course, with the Speed Triple, we created a market all of our own. There's nobody been able to touch Triumph in that serious naked sports sector. I mean, we've just gone on and kept improving that bike, so it's a market we created.
And what about this iconic shot behind me? I believe you might have had a hand in this one that's really stood the test of time.
Yeah, we employed a very creative agency that were doing work for Aston Martin, and the brief was simple. We want a sense of British humour, we want some bold imagery, particularly on this bike. So they found the right location in the back of King's Cross, which King's Cross in those days isn't as salubrious as it is today. And of course we had the Rottweiler, we all know the bite those have got. But on the left, I nicknamed the bike, the Speed Triple, the Ricky Hatton of the range. The best street fighter, pound for pound, this country's ever seen.
Fantastic. And moving on, very early into our journey, we got into racing, particularly with this bike. What was the benefit of racing to Triumph at this point in time?
The Speed Triple Challenge was actually a fantastic exercise looking back. We got great funding. Mobil Oil were suppliers of oil at the time. They put a lot of money into the fund. General Guarantee were a finance company. And John said, this is a project worth pushing. John Bloor gave us enough funds. We had a 50,000 prize fund. Believe me, in those days, that was some prize fund. But what we did, we attracted a who's who of racing. Ron Haslam, he became a technical link. He was the guy that used to make sure no one was cheating. We just had to make sure he wasn't cheating himself. We had Matt Llewellyn, Brian Morrison, the late David Jeffries, young Rutter. We had some great riders. It meant the racing was very, very close. We had a different winner each round. We sold an awful lot of parts that year, and I sold another 30 bikes because 30 dealers got involved. And you know what? We've never been racing before, but we didn't lose a race.
Very good. So moving on, we started to get into some of the really more significant steps away from the modular range, and probably no more important bike than the T595 in terms of something new for the business. I mean, just how important was this model when it was launched?
We were scratching around with sales, but when this bike came along, I realised Triumph could actually compete with the best. It drew huge attention. One of the first manufacturers to go fuel injection. The Fireblade was around then, and we all know how big a seller that was. The 916 was that, I think maybe the R1 as well. The Fireblade was 9,500. We pitched ours at 9,649. I'd say 99% of the bikes had an alarm system that made it 999 on their own. I'm not joking, if anybody gave a fiver off this bike at the dealers, my phone was red hot. The dealers made good money, and they were later obviously reinvested it in our brand. We were at the point of getting about 2,000 bikes a year up to this bike, but we used to have these well-controlled leaks out to the certain press. It meant we went to the NEC that year with a really good order bank. When we came back from the NEC, the order bank was 1,850 bikes, and we'd only been selling 2,000 a year. Some of our dealers were phenomenal. We had 3 dealers selling over 150. Jack Lilly of Shepperton, now part of the Lynn Group, had 185 deposits on this bike. Of course, it took us a year to get through those deposits, but by the time we got there, we had another bank of orders. So it was a phenomenal bike for us, one that we're grateful for in the growth of Triumph.
And a testament to what a bike it was and how popular it was by how many are parked outside today, which is absolutely wonderful to see.
If you see a pack of bikes on a Sunday, I guarantee you'll see a 595 in that pack.
So jumping on a bit, the year 2000, Factory 2 where we are here today, opened its doors, albeit not in a full production capacity at that point. What was that about? Was that about gearing up for growth, growing the business, or was that just about better facilities?
When I got interviewed, John Bloor told me that we had the capacity at Factory 1, which is a site some of you may have been at, which is just down Jacknell Road, not far from here. We had the capacity to build about 12,500 bikes. Well, we actually got to 30,000, I think, approximately volume, but we still weren't making money. We hadn't done a costing exercise as thorough enough. We simply had to increase production, and we had to increase our critical mass so that we could negotiate better with suppliers, so that we could get the better prices for our customers. John had the vision to build this, to acquire the site. He's a property developer, as you know, and coming in today, he hasn't even lost a yard of space. I've noticed Bloor Homes built right next to this site. So he had the vision to build that. And as you'll see shortly, that's one of the best decisions he ever made in what was to follow.
Yeah, so even back in these early days, the growth mindset was always there, and the looking forward, and it absolutely, what a decision. So moving on to 2001, I guess there was a lot of intrigue at the start when we relaunched Triumph with no Bonneville, and it took best part of 10 years to bring one back into the range. So what was the thinking behind coming to the party so late with this model?
The biggest question people used to ask me was, twin when? I got fed up one day and I said, look, I'm not a midwife, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. But we delayed the Bonneville for real reasons. We wanted to launch and position ourselves as a contemporary bike manufacturer. So you saw models like the Daytona, the Trophy, followed by the Tiger. Had we gone early with the Bonneville, I think we would have struggled to have the range we have today. And I think I can quite confidently say today, Triumph can produce any motorcycle and no one will question its credibility in creating those bikes. You've seen the development of the range. Other manufacturers have been pigeonholed, but it was a conscious decision not to start off with their classics that built contemporary. And of course, when the Bonnevilles came out, they gave us a huge lift. I can remember Carl Rosner, March the 1st, had 25 go out on one day. So it was a colossal seller. And it's been a major sector of the market, and Dev will touch on this, where we've just grown the range and produced more and more derivatives.
So things were going well, and then tragedy struck. So, you know, for those who don't know, but I'm sure most of you do, March 2002, the F1 fire, you know, it made the national news. It was a substantial industrial fire. What was your reaction when you woke up that morning and found out that work had burned down?
It wasn't waking up that morning. I was running the under-8 line for my son's football team, and I got a call from a general manager saying the factory's burned down. I said, you what? The factory's burned down. I rushed home, put local news on, and there it was. ATV Local Midlands News, full blaze. They asked about 20 of us to come in the next day, you know, team leaders. We needed to move quick, we needed a plan. So by the end of the Sunday night, we had a plan. We had press releases going out, we had dealer communications. We'd appointed by Sunday 2 specialists in handling fire, disasters and major claims. They knew exactly what to do, creating cost centers. We were ordering laptops, computers by Monday morning. We came in Monday, and this is where Factory 2 came in. We were able to go onto Factory 2 because the other place had been burnt down, and we were operational. The place was a sea of porta cabins. But on Monday, we processed orders that we'd received the previous Friday, and we were building new parts to send to dealers. And we looked after our dealers as well. Some dealers just committed to our brand, no product. We brought 35 containers back from various markets who were, unlike us, overstocked, 30 odd bikes per container. By the time those bikes had left those countries, we'd underwritten those with our dealers. We probably brought 1,000 bikes in to save our dealers. And they've never forgotten that. Again, emphasis of the reactive ability of Triumph.
Yeah, been truly phenomenal. When I reflect back on the history, if ever there was a point in time to say, well, we had a go, this was it, wasn't it? You know, hadn't really made money up until that point, huge investment, a massive disaster, and yet the determination to go forward.
It showed our steel and resolve, and what was really nice, we had been badgering our dealer in Edinburgh to give us a soulless operation. When he saw the reaction to us committing to a new plant, which by the way, we built in 6 months, he said, guys, I'm coming with you. And he invested in a soulless operation in Edinburgh. Simply on the way we reacted on that day.
Phenomenal. And out of the ashes of disaster, I guess some of the most iconic modern triumphs of the 2000s with the Rocket 3, the Sprint ST 1050, the Speed Triple, which again moved the game on for us. And again, the car park is littered with fantastic examples of these bikes standing the test of time. Just how huge an impact did these models have on our sales, Bruno?
It was huge, and actually we knew it was going to be huge, so we held their first global dealer conference. Now, from not having built a bike before, a few years down the line, we had 1,000 dealers worldwide turn up at their London venue, and the rocket had already been launched at the Milan show. And I must tell you a funny story. No one's ever heard this, not even Devron. But I was in the Milan stand, and the crew from Kawasaki bundled in front of me because we were unveiling the rocket. And one of the guys from Kawasaki said, "It's an effing dinosaur. That will never sell." Those were his true words. We planned to sell 200 that year. We built and sold 500 in the UK, with their dealer in Essex really going to town. He sold 50 on his own back, didn't he, on the motorcycles. But at the conference, we kept back the Speed Triple 1050 and the Sprint. The Sprint ST 1050 was probably the bike, I think, if you ask Triumph owners, ticks every single box for what they want. The biggest benchmark at the time was the VFR. Everyone knows how great a bike that was for Honda, great all-rounder. We beat it in its first year, and it went on to sell for a number of years. But that platform that drove both the Speed Triple and the Sprint is probably one of the greatest engine platforms that we've developed.
Yeah.
So a great success for us, and that's where we started to really grow our sales in this country.
And I think what was apparent at this point as well, we were leaning into that triple identity ever harder, weren't we? Which obviously then carried forward into the Daytona 675. Now, prior to this model being launched, all of our forays into the 600mm sports bike had been 4-cylinder. So,
It had.
what was the thinking behind the triple, and was it the right thing to do?
One of the greatest things we learned from the fire was make sure you've got grey insurance. We had grey insurance, and one of the things that the insurance covered was consequential loss. That means that they covered all the costs, but until we got to the volume that we were at before the fire, they were stumping out on lost revenue. So the insurers gave us a huge fund to re-promote the brand to get it going again, but also we employed a specialist consultancy that looks at businesses. They're the sort of people, if Coca-Cola drops 0.5% market share, they would use this company to tell them why that's happened. And one of the things they said, and the findings that we really took on board, is focus on what you're known for. Triumph Motorcycles was always known for twins, it was always known for triples. We had a 675 in development, that became a triple. One of the best decisions we ever made. Of course, it came out into the most competitive sector of the market, the 600 Super Sports. And again, before the bike and with the odd leak or two, we had 1,000 deposits before people saw it, and it became a great seller.
My first personal Triumph, and that's probably why I'm stood here today. So hugely important bike for the brand, and absolutely phenomenal machine. So moving on to 2008 and reflecting on volumes and how these things all came together. This was the year that we broke 50,000 bikes per annum, which was a fantastic achievement. It eclipsed anything of the Meriden era. Did that come about faster than expected?
That's a difficult question, because I've since realised that when you're brand new, particularly abroad, it's very hard to gain momentum. We were quite a mature market by that period, but just look at BSA, Enfield, Norton. They've tried to come into the UK and they've worked damn hard. Their volume isn't great at all. So, and America only came on board in '95. So it took a while, but we've now, of course, diversified since then, and Dev will touch on some of the extra sectors since I retired. But now, of course, 50,000 is 6 months production.
Yeah, absolutely. But as you can sort of tell, you know, this was a snowball that was just getting bigger and bigger with the introduction of more and more new models into the range. And in 2010, we launched the all-new Tiger 800 family. Again, what was the reaction to these in the market? You touched on earlier the success of the earlier Tigers.
These were massive sellers. I think the R&D guys did a phenomenal job. They brought out two versions. They brought out the road version and they brought out the off-road version. And with each, they offered three levels of specification. So you've got your base model at the right price point. Then you've got Model 2, which was a certain amount of accessories and standard. But then 3, we threw a lot of accessories. And those bikes really were the best buy if you actually costed out the accessories. And those, coincidentally, were our best sellers. So they helped us at that point become number 1 in the market. And suddenly we were outselling everyone. And we achieved that for a number of years following that. So it put us into the real world of competing in a smaller sector that we had been with very, very high spec bikes.
Yeah, well, one thing with the brand is we've always looked at the market opportunity and where it sits. Obviously, middleweight adventure was a big one, so we launched into that, and that went well. Then, of course, we took the fight to the Germans with the Tiger 1200. So, what impact did this have on sales?
The timing was perfect because the public had seen the success and they'd seen and ridden the 800s, and then we came along with a real winner here. And again, the guys from R&D did immense research. There's very good models we could benchmark. There was one particular model we could benchmark. You probably know which one. It was from the BM camp. But what was great, we outsold it in the first year. We really did well with this bike in the UK.
Yeah, another one that stood the test of time and just showed the breadth of ambition at Triumph. So by this point, the brand was really starting to grow in stature. I think it was far bigger than just the motorcycles we were making. And of course, with that came some special people knocking on the door for different projects. And one of them was behind me with the Beckham into the Unknown documentary. So how did that happen, and what was the reaction?
You all recognise this guy, don't you? Yeah, he's a bit of an icon, yeah. Well, we got approached by the BBC. David Beckham had finished his career. He wanted to draw a line under his footballing days. His dream was to ride with his 3 close mates that he'd known since schoolboy across Brazil. Unknown, incognito, roughing it, sleeping in hammocks, sleeping rough. Could we help? And just like Mission Impossible 2, we were given a few days to make an answer, and we replied instantly. Funnily, they wanted scramblers. We didn't have a scrambler in the range for another 3 years. The street scrambler came out. So what we did, we sent a technician, one of their top technicians, over to Brazil, and on 4 Bonnevilles, they converted it to scrambler specs, and we sent them out the wheels, handlebars, and bits and pieces. But you all agree the coverage was brilliant, yes, and it's only when you see these documentaries you realise how many people don't know your back. Well, the next day we had people going into dealerships saying, oh, I'd like, particularly ladies, saying, oh, I'd like to buy my husband or my boyfriend the bike. Have you got the Beckham Triumph on sale? Well, we suddenly had to move very quick because the copyrights with David Beckham are absolutely rigid. So one dealer came out with a Peckham special. Anyway, it was a great exercise, and I think we've all seen the benefit of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I reflect on this for me really marked a turning point when, rather than people making Triumph cool, we were starting to make people cool. And they were knocking on the door because they wanted the brand for the development of their image as well as ours, which was nice. So, right. No, you click on Bruno, so I think we're going to change roles now, and I'll see if I can answer my questions as well as Bruno answered his.
It's my turn now to put Devron under the spot. So 2015 was a major year, very pivotal. Talk us through it, Dev. What made it such a big year for us?
Yes, I think 2015, the business always seems to have gone in cycles, and 2015 definitely felt like the start of another chapter. Most of our big moments, we've gathered our global dealer network together, and 2015 was no exception to that. We had the best part of 1,000 dealers at Excel in London, and we had lots of exciting things to share with them. We'd launched a new brand identity, which is when we started to move away from the sort of the blue logo that we'd launched with to the black and white. We wanted a modern incarnation of the brand that really, matched the company that we'd become rather than the company that we started as. And of course, that culminated in the launch of the new Bonneville range. So prior to that, we'd been evolving the Bonneville platform from the one that had been launched in 2001, and that had run its course. So we launched an all-new range with water-cooled engines, 900 and 1200, and they absolutely just took the brand on another level in terms of premiumality, quality, aesthetic, ultra desirable, and absolutely ahead of their time. And I think nothing epitomised that more than the Thruxton, which was just this amazing fusion of retro, modern, sports capability, and it absolutely took off and ignited for us.
So, the two key models, Thruxton 1200 and the Bobber. Now, I always thought they'd be niche models, but you're going to tell me otherwise. They were successful, weren't they?
I think it's been part of the fun of the job over the years, hasn't it? Working out exactly how these things are going to do, and I think that we've got a bit of wind in our sails with the Thruxton. It sold around 750 here in the UK in its first year, which was phenomenal and far better than we expected. And I remember seeing the early shots of the Bobber, and it was our first go at a cruiser where we really embraced being ourselves. We weren't being governed by other people and how they styled their cruisers. We really went back to what makes Triumph with the DNA of this bike, and you could see that with the Bonneville silhouette that ran throughout, but ultimately, you know, in more of a cruiser package. And yeah, it was a niche bike, it was a white space bike, there was nothing like it on the market, but the reaction to it upon launch was sensational. And during that year, we showed one of the true qualities of Triumph, which is our agility and our ability to react to an opportunity. I think we thought we'd sell about 300 or 400. We actually sold 1,000 of these bikes in the UK in the first year, which was truly amazing, and it went on to propel us to a record year for sales in that year. We were flying bikes back in from Thailand, doing all sorts of things to maximise the opportunity, which was absolutely awesome.
So a new chapter there, Moto 2. What was the thinking behind the partnership?
Yes,
and how did that feed into production, and what impact did it have on sales?
So I think we were really getting into our stride at this point, you know, with the brand and partnership opportunities were coming along. Obviously, Moto 2 took us back into the top tier of racing, provided a fantastic opportunity to prove our engineering capability to the world, which I think is unquestionable, take us to a new audience, and actually take some learnings from that and feed those into our production bikes. And since obviously this partnership, as those of you who follow MotoGP will have seen, we've broken multiple lap records, speed records, reliability records. It's been a fabulous proving ground for the engine. The sound is amazing, and all of the good stuff in there comes through into the modern Triumphs that we ride today. And the Street Triple, you know, it's the heartbeat of that bike, and that has been a true icon for us.
So the first inspired bike from Hinckley was a Daytona. How did that fare?
Yeah, well, at the time we'd sort of ceased production on the Daytona 675, and when we launched the partnership to the dealers, all they were saying to me is, "We need a Daytona. We need a Daytona. We need." If you build one of these guys, you're going to sell loads of them. So naturally, that opportunity was afforded to us, and the decision to put the 765 engine into a Daytona was made, and we launched this Moto 2 special edition. There was 765 made available in the US and Canada, and 765 made available in the rest of the world, of which here in the UK we had a couple of hundred. And whenever we get special bikes like this, one of the things we have to think about is how are we going to allocate these or make these available to dealers, give everybody who wants one a chance. So we tried something a bit different with this one. We told the dealers a week in advance that we would be opening the order book at 9 o'clock Monday morning, and they had a week to reach out to their customers and give them an opportunity to secure this motorcycle. And we were feeling quite confident to the point that we put a little GoPro in front of the email inbox where the orders were going to come in to see what happened. And it was amazing. 9 o'clock came and ping, 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 ping. And within 30 minutes, we'd taken deposits for all 200 of the UK allocation. And those bikes then ran through. And for sure, anybody who's got one of these has got a very special motorcycle. Obviously, we haven't made a Daytona 765 since.
And I think to support that, one of the great things we realised with bikes that were going to be really big sellers, the public always knew Triumph couldn't make endless numbers. So if they wanted that bike for the riding season, they were putting their orders in right at the start, weren't they?
They certainly were.
Now, you're about to enter a new sector,
Yeah.
mid-range, all excited. And COVID, of course, no need to remind people of COVID, the impact that had. What was the impact like on Triumph?
Yeah, so this was a crazy time. I actually started this role in November 2019, full of optimism for the year ahead. We knew that we'd got a new range of middleweight bikes coming, of which the Trident was going to be the first one, and it was going to take us into a market segment where we hadn't been previously, a lower price point, more accessible, and it was really going to bring more people into the brand. And on the 15th of March, things were going quite well. And then on the 20th of March, as you know, the whole country went into lockdown, and we just hit a wall, as everybody did. The country stopped, we all went home. We sat at home for a week or so, watching Boris on the news, working out what we were going to do, and it just absolutely stopped the business dead. I mean, we would normally sell about 700 bikes in April. In the UK, we sold 60, and those sort of numbers were being mirrored in every market around the world. So much as the fire was a crisis point, this was another crisis point. And much as the reaction to the fire was very quick, the reaction to COVID was equally very rapid. And a team of people were assembled, all socially distanced, I might add, to work out what we could do to get the business operational and how we could sell at distance. And we went on a massive learning curve, and the purchasing team did an amazing job in terms of securing components and things from suppliers who were also in various states of shutdown. And absolutely Triumph roared out of COVID far faster than most other brands, because of that agility, because of that ability and desire, and in the heart of that, Trident 660 had an amazing time, huge numbers of sales, awards around the world, and many new Triumph customers as a consequence. So yeah, the post-COVID era was surprisingly good for bikes, and we enjoyed a good couple of years following on from that.
Now, there's been a number of iconic partnerships with Triumph, going back to Hollywood using Triumph, in the 50s and 60s, but I guess the Bond one topped it all.
Yeah.
What was the impact at Hinkley of that film?
I think when this news dropped, it was I was like a kid in a sweet shop, as I'm sure many of us were. Bond is synonymous with British brands, all the cool ones, and somehow that had escaped us. And the fact that we were now in a situation where Eon were talking to us about wanting us to be in Bond rather than us talking to them about wanting to be in Bond. That's just amazing, because you can't buy this sort of opportunity when you're a business of our size. You need them to want it, and want it they did. So obviously, the Scrambler 1200 footage from the film was tremendous. We launched some special edition models off the back of that, which are true collector's items. There's an example in the back corner if you haven't seen it. But more, coming back to the Beckham piece, it's just this snowball effect of the brand growing and growing, and reaching a bigger audience than ever before, and it truly becoming something bigger and something more aspirational.
I've got to say, Dave, I wasn't here at the time, but I did go and see the Bond film, and it was out of this world.
Proud moment, wasn't it? A proud moment. And talking about proud moments.
Yeah, well, this is a massive milestone. I don't need to say anything that it did for the business, but what was it like being part of that photo and being at Hinkley at the time?
Yeah, another pinch me moment. There's lots of people from Triumph here today, and if you talk to any one of us, we're all united by a common thread, which is pride in the organisation and pride in the part we play. So to see the business grow from nothing to 1 million motorcycles, in just over 30 years was absolutely phenomenal, and everybody in the business has played their part in that, and to share in the moment. With that fantastic Tiger 900 Rally Pro 1 of edition that was built to commemorate it, it just goes to show everything that this business is made of, and a hugely proud moment to be a part of.
Is that young Nick Bloor, I see?
It is a young Nick Bloor, and there's a few other faces in the front row that you might recognise if you get some time.
2023 was another milestone. You entered the 400cc market, never been in it before. How the hell do you gauge demand for something like that?
Yeah, well, the reason we all age twice as fast at Triumph is because of the speed that the business moves at. So, we're not content to stand still. I think we could see that growth from our sort of mature markets was becoming more limited because we had exposed ourselves to most of those. So, clearly we'd looked at new segments. We'd never been a small capacity brand. we'd had a couple of goes at how we might actually achieve that, and we came out with the 400s, obviously in partnership with Bajaj. And it was a really fascinating task trying to understand the volume impact of these bikes on our business. So we really benchmarked the premium European competition when we developed these bikes. So they were high specification, had all of the bits that you would expect of a quality motorcycle, build quality, spec, features, and when we looked at sales of comparable, bikes from other brands, certainly here in the UK, they did 300-400 a year. Nothing huge, and that was our initial sort of reference point for what might be possible with these bikes. And of course Enfield had crept onto the scene and showed what was possible at a lower price point in the market. We were sort of looking at both of those going, not sure what's going to happen here. So we started at the beginning of the year thinking we were going to sell 500, and if I told you that by the end of that year we'd sold 1,957 bikes, I think you'll, marvel at how the hell did they do that, because the speed of reaction to actually understand that, oh, hang on, this is a bit bigger than we thought, and get that into production, and get that into the market, and get that into the hands of the customers was a phenomenal achievement, and it's really propelled us on. And from there, we finally beat that 2017 record and got over 10,000 sales in the UK. It took us over 100,000 sales for the first time as a global business. A number we haven't been dropped below since, and it really did elevate us to the next level as a new part of our range.
One thing I can just hear you all thinking, these guys are crap at forecasting, yeah?
Crap at forecasting, but good at reacting when we get it wrong. Yeah, I think you're probably right.
And if that wasn't enough, now this really did surprise me when I read it. You went to the motocross market with the MX range, yes?
Yeah. I mean, again, I can honestly say this one even surprised me when we got this presentation. I was like, no, you're joking, right? It's not April the 1st, is it? But no, we weren't joking. So why motocross of enduro? Well, again, if you come back to the theme of this presentation, it's all about growth. That as custodians of the brand is what we're charged with, to grow the brand, grow the sustainability of the business, take it to new places. And again, feeling like we were starting to saturate the road bike market, if we wanted to go on another leg of growth, then off-road was felt to be one of the ways that we could achieve that. And of course, being Triumph, we don't play at things. The strapline for this project was all in, and that's because we absolutely were all in. So, we'd assembled some of the best names in the industry, the most well-known names, Ricky Carmichael, Ivan Cervantes, the best of the best, to help us to develop a bike that would be capable from the get-go, and absolutely has it proven to be. We're still chasing that elusive championship in the Global Race Series, but we are seeing podiums and race wins now in Supercross, in MXGP, in Enduro GP, and a proud moment for me in the UK was winning the British MX2 Championship in our first year with our team. That's amazing. We get used to saying these amazing things all the time in Triumph because we're blessed to work for an amazing company, but to go in and achieve those sort of things in year one, is something that you kind of have to step back from sometimes and remind yourself just how remarkable it is. So it's early, we've got lots to do, but yeah, it's an exciting part of the business for sure.
Well, that's brought us right up to date, but before we finish, I think these guys would like a little gem to go home with.
A little gem.
A little gem would be, what insights can you give us, Dev, for 2027?
I'm going to reel out the corporate mantra here, aren't I? That obviously I can't tell you about anything new, but what I would say is, well, look at the last 35 years. I think you'd all agree they've been exciting, and I can assure you that we don't plan to stop with that in 2026. The new Speed Twin 1200 TFC model has already been announced this year. That's the tip of the iceberg. We've got a global dealer conference in October. You've probably gathered that we only do that when we think there's good exciting things to share. So I'll leave you on that bombshell and say 2026 promises to be a belter like the last 35 years. So big thanks from us for your time today, for coming and spending this day with us. It's a huge privilege to be in front of you here today. Bruno, thank you very much for all
Very
you've done for the
welcome. Have a
brand.
safe journey back.
And enjoy the rest of your day, folks.